200 files it completed over the last 18 months, amongst other measures. Well, this is in an effort to regain the public's trust after it suffered reputational damage following allegations of misconduct in the work it did for Gupta-linked companies. Well, last week, two of KPMG's partners, Sipho, Malaba and Dumi, Tshuma, resigned with immediate effect. The two had been facing disciplinary charges related to work done for VBS Mutual Bank. Well, the firm held a press briefing in Johannesburg today.
KPMG says it is deeply disappointed that it is once again in the news for the wrong reasons. The resignations of Sipho, Malaba and Dumi Tshuma have brought into question the rot into the auditing firm, especially at a time when the company is trying to pull itself out of a reputational glut. CEO Dumi says both cases were connected to VBS Bank and the partners' failure to comply with the firm's policies.
Us as a firm, we've got policies and procedures that require people to declare financial interests. Not all of those were followed, so we were not satisfied with that. Also, to Prof's point, part of our responsibility is to make sure that we actually not only just follow procedures, but we also act with integrity. So when questions were asked, not all the information was provided to us, and it was felt that some of the information was misleading. So this is shocking for us and disappointing.
The auditing firm says the big banks that it audits, which include Barclays Africa and Investec, have not been affected by the latest developments. The South African Reserve Bank, which placed VBS under curatorship, has now also commissioned a forensic investigation into the bank's business affairs.
What we have actually sought to do is to directly, when the issues were raised with us, we went and spoke to our clients. So where they have been involved, we've had those conversations. We've checked that the work that was done in this period was properly reviewed. We also offered to do additional reviews, and so we're working quite closely with our clients to ensure that there is reassurance, not just by a word, but indeed in the actions that we had taken while they were there, and the actions that we're continuing to take.
The firm says it will take what it calls unprecedented steps to gain public trust. These include reopening files completed in the last 18 months and conducting background checks on all partners and their spouses. It has so far lost less than 10% of its client base since September 2017.
We are undertaking this unprecedented step of reviewing all the audit files, say for the last 18 months, selectively, to make sure that we cover each partner, to make sure that the quality work of each partner is reviewed under this process. This goes beyond the normal review of an audit file by a second partner or monitoring by KPMG International or equivalent of that. It goes beyond that. Want a more comprehensive review of those files to make sure that we reduce this possibility of something of another VBS coming up.
KPMG has given assurance that an investigation into Malaba and Tshuma will still continue even though they have resigned, and that additional members will be added to the board of directors in order to strengthen its corporate governance. Sipho, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, joining us from our Pretoria studios is Themba Godi, who is the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Mr. Godi, a very good evening to you. Thank you very much for your time. Now, of course, this is now 6 months after Scopa called for the review of KPMG contracts, particularly with the state. Now, the auditing firm says it will launch an unprecedented review of all of its work done by the company's partners in the last 18 months. Is this scope satisfactory for Scopa?
Well, we indeed have called on KPMG to do much more than what they had done up to that far. I believe that this will be one of the many steps that they need to take to clean themselves and to clean the company. I do think that in the case of the two gentlemen in relation to the VBS Bank, whom they are saying they are going to investigate even though they've resigned, we feel as Scopa that actually they should start from the management of KPMG, who were in charge when the SARS debacle happened, when the auditing of the Gupta-linked companies happened. Because in that particular instance, what happened was that those gentlemen were given 3 months' salaries and they were retired, and nothing has happened to them. But in this particular instance, these 2 gentlemen who have resigned are still going to be investigated. And whatever they've done is going to come out in the open. So I think they need to start right from the beginning. That's when we can be certain that there is no cover-up, because at a time when KPMG was being managed by white people at the top, those who messed up were given golden handshakes and shoved away. And here you have 2 Africans at the helm.
Mr. Godi, are you insinuating, if I could just, are you insinuating by any chance perhaps that the 2 officials now who have resigned, or the partners that have resigned, this is basically KPMG going after some of the smaller fish within the auditing firm, and perhaps those who occupy the higher echelons within the company itself are basically might get off scot-free?
No, most definitely. And we did raise this with them at the hearing to say, can you tell us why did you take that particular step? When the people who were actually running KPMG nationally in this country, when they messed up big time, in ways that had serious political ramifications for the country, KPMG has never been interested in investigating those people. What did they do? Gave them a golden handshake and quietly took them out of the company. That's why I'm saying that a Scopa will be satisfied and will be happy if they start from the beginning and say, let's investigate everybody and bring to the open what were the shenanigans that were involved. So whilst we welcome the current measures that are being taken, but we're saying they can and should actually do more.
Now, one could perhaps argue, Mr. Godi, that there's a systematic problem at KPMG in light of the new scandal that you've just alluded to, where the 2 partners responsible for auditing VBS Mutual have now resigned. Now, with is that enough? I mean, with KPMG's woes seemingly deepening, how concerning is this also, and what potential risk could this pose for the state? Because if we look at over the past year, the auditing firm has entered into over 1,000 projects with the state and constitutional institutions.
Yeah, no, true. Look, when KPMG appeared before Scopa, we actually demonstrated that the lack of ethics and the rot at KPMG went far much deeper than just the SARS issue, the Gupta-linked auditing, and demonstrated that KPMG actually is at odds with regulatory authorities in many countries, including our neighbors here in Botswana, where KPMG executives have been found to be wanting. But also, if you look at that broadly, you find that a lot of our auditing firms are actually seriously challenged. You know that there's this case of PwC at SAA, you know there's this case of Deloitte with National Treasury. So it is basically a challenge of the lack of ethics, or the challenge of ethics in a broader sense. And what that does is that it brings into question the work that these companies does, especially with the state. That's where our interest as Scopa came in to say, if government is giving you so much work and yet we can't vouch for your ethics, how then do we place reliance on your work?
How much damage could that do in terms of the numbers of contracts that KPMG has obtained with government? I mean, this must have a massive ramifications given the current woes that continue to plague KPMG.
Look, when KPMG appeared before us, one of the issues that we raised with them, which they said they would look into, but of course we knew they wouldn't, was that maybe to the extent that the independent regulatory board for auditors, IRBA, is investigating KPMG, can they at least take a step back from contesting for government work and continue to do work in the in the private sector and wait until these investigations are completed and we have a sense of what is happening, because at this point, especially as Scopa, we deal with a lot of work done by KPMG. Now, what should be our attitude to that work? What reliance, what confidence must we have on the work that is done by KPMG? So yes, we don't think that at this stage we would encourage anybody, be it a department or a municipality, to engage KPMG, because we'll have a problem with the reliance on their work. Because remember, auditors bring skills and trust, and once trust is broken, then there is nothing left as a basis to engage them on.
Mr. Godi, you sound very concerned about the credibility of the work that is done by KPMG, and you're saying that as Scopa as well. Would you consider at this point distancing yourself or removing yourselves from KPMG as an auditing firm?
Look, in our last hearing, we were told that IRBA is investigating, and I'm sure you'll recall that when IRBA appeared before the joint committees on the stain of matter, we raised the pace of their work, and they indicated that yes, they are continuing with KPMG's investigations. And I think at this stage, as Scopa, we will be very reluctant to put any reliance on the work that is done by KPMG for government, and have actually said, look, we would want to have a review. And I think a number of government departments led by National Treasury have sought to put KPMG on the eyes. And I think you will also recall that in the IFMS at National Treasury, KPMG was named as one of the companies that got paid without doing any work. So I don't think KPMG is in the good books of, firstly of Scopa and anybody else in Parliament. And so it should be in government as well.
Mr. Godi, in light of the latest debacle relating to KPMG and VBS Bank, will Scopa be calling the auditing firm to account?
Look, the last engagement we had, we decided that we are going to await the report from IRBA, because IRBA is investigating them. You bring them before Parliament, and what we noted in our last engagement was that the company was more concerned with damage control than with getting to the bottom of what exactly happened. And so we believe that once the IRBA report is out, it will give us a basis to check whether we should call them in or not. Our most critical concern is whether KPMG is still fit to do work for government or not, in the light of the persistent debacles that point to very poor governance and very poor ethics in the company.
Mr. Themba Godi, the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Scopa, thank you very much for joining us from our Pretoria studios. You do have a good evening. Let's take a short break here on the news at 9. More news straight after this.